Thank you, and I apologize for dressing so casual today for the Congressman, but I'm heading up to camp to get ready for the epic day of service, so sign up. But as we're entering a time of tribulation in our country because it's election year. And so that means for the next couple of months, we're going to be inundated with campaign. And that's great because that's a democracy. That's what America's about. I love it. But it takes a special kind of bravery to be an elected official in any country. It takes somebody who is willing to stand up and say, I'm going to put myself out there. And I want to thank Joe on behalf of all of us for willing to stand up and do that for every single one of us. You can read his CV up here and he'll talk a little bit about it, but what's important that we all know is that Joe has been the most effective legislator from our delegation to Washington in taking more bills to law than anyone else in the state of Colorado. And that's the mark of success. So Joe, without further ado, thank you so much. Come on up.
Well, good afternoon. It is wonderful to be back in Boulder and to be back at Boulder Rotary. And I want to say thank you to, of course, your president, the leadership of the Rotary, to your president-elect, the future president. He neglected to mention one important part of my biography, particularly as it relates to my service in the United States Congress. A representative is only as good as their staff. At the end of the day, the work that we do in serving the people that we are so privileged to represent is contingent on having staff members, team members who are driven, service-oriented individuals. And I've been lucky to have one of those people, a young man. He's not so young anymore. He was very young when he started with me, as I was, as you saw from that photo. I've aged, Congress has aged me significantly. It would age you too, just for the record, serving with the kind of folks who unfortunately are getting elected these days. But in any event, a young man by the name of Max Coker, who is a member of the Rotary and has been an important member of my team. And so I'm grateful to him, and there are a number of members of my team here who are as well. Emma Marion, who's the Director of Community Affairs also, so grateful to both of them for being here. I want to say thank you for the invitation to coming back to Boulder Rotary. It's been, I think, about 2 years since I had the privilege of being able to address you all and a group of engaged, active citizens who are playing a pivotal role in their communities, in our state, and in our country. I know there are a few luminaries among you as well. Commissioner Loachman, I believe, is here, and Councilwoman Marquez, also from the Boulder City Council. But it has been quite a bit of time since the last time I spoke here. And I was trying to come up, as I was driving over, the right words that I could use to describe everything that's happened in the last 2 years since I last spoke to all of you, both professionally and personally. It has been a complicated time for our country, for our state, and I think for many of us. For me personally, it has been a very complicated 2 years with incredible highs of the birth of my son, our second child, Joshua, who was born last year. He turns 1 in a month. To, of course, some health challenges that I think some of you are aware of that my wife has been experiencing for the last 6 months. And so the balancing that we all face in our own private personal lives as our families experience different stressors or illnesses is something that has impacted us personally. Professionally, I would say that the last time I was here, I was far more optimistic about our ability to achieve significant change in the United States Congress in addressing some of the consequential challenges that we face as a country. That has been tempered, I will say, by the dysfunction and the chaos that unfortunately has engulfed the House of Representatives in particular over the course of the last year and a half. And as I sat and listened to the four-way test, which I'm certainly familiar with from prior visits to Rotary, the thought occurred to me that we could certainly use that test in the United States Congress. We'd be far better served, I think, if every member on both sides of the aisle challenged themselves to answer those 4 very simple, very straightforward questions that I think unlock so much potential in terms of us being able to achieve the common good, which of course is why we are in this work to begin with. I've had the privilege and the honor of representing our community in Congress for 5 years. It's hard to believe. This is my 3rd term in the United States House of Representatives. I've been fortunate to have been given a number of different opportunities to serve in leadership in the House, most recently by my colleagues elected a few weeks ago to replace Jim Clyburn as the Assistant Minority Leader of the U.S. House of Representatives. And I thank you for that. I say that, I mention it only as a reference, I think, to this incredible community that I have the privilege of representing. I talk a lot to my colleagues and in the House about the eclectic, informed, engaged electorate that constitutes the 2nd Congressional District. More advanced degrees in this district than just about any congressional district in the country, more federal labs and universities and research institutions than just about any congressional district in the country. For multiple election cycles, this district has had the distinct honor and superlative of being the district that has the highest voter participation of any congressional district in the country. And although I like to say it's because of the candidate, I know that's not necessarily the case, that it has far more to do with the citizenry in this community, in a district that stretches across 12 counties, that is larger geographically than 9 states, from the breathtaking mountain communities in Routt County and Grand County and Jackson County to, of course, the Front Range communities right here in Boulder, Colorado, Fort Collins, Estes Park, and so many others, including Lafayette, where, of course, my wife and I are so lucky to be able to raise our 2 children and call that community home. So it is a privilege to represent this community in the Congress, and I have no doubt in my mind that to the extent I've been lucky to serve in House leadership, it is only a byproduct of, again, being given this opportunity by my constituents, by all of you and so many others in this community to do this important work. And so, let us talk about some of that work. The 118th Congress, as I said, has been a complicated one. We started, as many of you might recall, I don't know how many of you all watched the opening of the 118th Congress when we were electing a speaker, the marathon session. I told my wife, there are a couple of nights in the middle of the night where I'd wake up saying, Hakeem Jeffries, because, we every day, those of you who might remember that speaker vote, we went for 7 days voting for speaker, right? Literally 15 different rounds of voting. And to me, it was a harbinger, unfortunately, of the things to come in the 118th Congress, where without, as your president so well articulated, without delving into any kind of partisanship, we'll just simply say that it has been a dysfunctional time. We had the first, arguably closest, I should say, default on our national debt back in May of last year, 6 government shutdown showdowns, the first vacating of the United States Speaker of the House since the mid-19th century. It has been the least productive Congress legislatively, just in terms of sheer volume, since the 1930s, just to give you a sense of context. So when I say that this Congress has been chaotic and dysfunctional, you know that I mean it. That does not mean that there are not opportunities to still move the ball forward. My team and I are singularly focused on doing precisely that. When I was elected to Congress 5 years ago, I made a commitment to the people of the 2nd Congressional District that irrespective of your worldview, of where you happen to fall on the ideological lens, that I'm here to represent you and your interests, and that I would work with anyone in good faith in Washington, D.C. to try to solve some of the problems and the challenges that we face. And we've done that. I co-chair and am the co-founder of 3 bipartisan congressional caucuses. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. The Bipartisan Wildfire Caucus, the Bipartisan Colorado River Caucus. The headwaters, of course, we are in our congressional district, in the 2nd District up in Grand County, and the Fentanyl Prevention Caucus. All 3 caucuses have one simple rule. You can only join if you bring a member of the opposing political party along with you. which unfortunately has kept them pretty small. But we are growing, small and mighty. Each caucus ranges between 20 to 25 members of 20 to 26, I should say, members of Congress at any given time. Republicans and Democrats, again, trying to find common ground, trying to ultimately move the ball forward in addressing some of the challenges that we face. And I think it is a model that we could emulate and should emulate in the years to come to try to restore some semblance of regular order, of bipartisanship, of collaboration and cooperation in the United States Congress, which is sorely, sorely missing right now. There are a laundry list of items, of legislative priorities that the Congress must address that I think warrant the attention of federal policymakers. I suspect some of you will ask some questions centered on those priorities, and I won't go through the laundry list today. I will just simply say that it is a shame and a tragedy that those priorities are going unmet and unaddressed right now because of the dysfunction that seems to have taken hold in Washington. It will take, in my view, the good faith and leadership and initiative of members who are willing to do the right thing and to not necessarily be held captive by more partisan interests who would seek to have that dysfunction become a permanent fixture of our nation's capital. We must, in my view, fight against that. And you all have an important role to play in that regard. And I'll veer a bit away from the legislative update that I know I was scheduled to give, because again, I imagine some of the more technical matters will come up in the Q&A, to speak, I guess, a little bit more, well, perhaps in a more esoteric way about some of what I think plagues our society and our body politic right now. Because fundamentally, my title, I mean, the most important title, of course, I have is father and husband, but the title I have in the Congress is representative. I am but a reflection of the community that has elected me to serve. And to the extent we want our representatives in Congress, in the House of Representatives, to function differently, we, as a society, as a community, must function differently. I worry about the inability of members of the House to disagree without being disagreeable, to show some semblance of empathy to another's worldview, to try to understand the arguments on the merits that one might make, irrespective of whether you might viscerally disagree with those arguments. But to the extent I have those concerns, and I have them, they are but a reflection of the concerns I have about our broader society. And it's one of the reasons why Rotary is so vitally important. There's a book, I don't know if any folks here are familiar with, called Bowling Alone. Anyone familiar with that book? A show of hands. We see a number of folks, more folks than usual. Oh, now I see John Taylor raised. He's the only man in the room with a tie, for that matter, just for the record. But I see John raised his hand, and he's heard me talk about this before. It's a wonderful book. It is about 23, 24 years old, written, I think, in 1999, in the year 2000, but hasn't aged a bit in terms of its central thesis. And I think what it imparts to the reader, which is that over the last 50 to 70 years, to the extent that you extend out from when the book was first published, there has been a decay of the institutions that used to serve vital roles in our communities in connecting folks who might have different worldviews and come from different walks of life, that in some respects served as the connective tissue underlying so much else in broader society. How many of you are on a bowling team? Show of hands. No one. Don't be embarrassed. You don't have to. You can raise your hand. I'm not encouraging you to join a bowling team, but what I am suggesting, and what this book suggests, is that if one looks back at the empirical data going back to the 1960s, 1970s, that you would find, generally speaking, the participation rate in bowling leagues, on a bowling team, far higher than they are, or they were in the year 2000, and certainly than they are today. And it is but a microcosm of, again, these institutions within our society that provide that connective tissue. If you were on a bowling league in the 1970s, you might have, as members of your bowling league, a Republican and a Democrat. You might have 4 or 5 different people of different religious faiths, an engineer, a plumber, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, folks who brought to the table different lived experiences. And ultimately, that experience of being able to connect in something as simple as bowling would provide the connective tissue to recognize that we're all in this together, that we're common citizens of a common country with a shared purpose. And the Rotary, in my view, is one of the last institutions in some respects that I think fits the bill that this particular book articulated so well. So what I say to you is that although I have a certain view electorally about what should and should not happen in the election come this November, just as important for all of us, to the extent that we are interested in repairing the tear in the fabric of our body politic, is the work we do every day, engaging with our neighbors and our friends, our family members, our colleagues, folks that you see at the grocery stores, citizens you might encounter at the park, trying to find ways to break down barriers so that we can begin to understand one another again. To the extent we do that, I believe it will inure to everyone's benefit, and I believe that you will play a part in changing the incentive structure that has unfortunately generated the dysfunction and the chaos that you see on full display on Capitol Hill. Until then, I'll certainly continue to do my part, doing everything I can to deliver for this congressional district, for the state of Colorado, and for the people that I'm so humbled to serve. I thank you for giving me that opportunity. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to coming back to Rotary sometime soon. Thank you.
Congressman, I don't think there's any more controversial issue in America now than immigration. This isn't so much to put you on the spot for what you believe, but what are you hearing in Congress that might be productive in reconciling us to our history of immigration and to the challenge at our especially southern border right now?
It's a great question, and it is perhaps one of the most confounding experiences for me personally in Washington, D.C., to encounter a public policy issue, notwithstanding that it is controversial, that nonetheless I think could be solved fairly easily, but nonetheless falls victim to party politics and to the polarization that exists more broadly. So just starting at the top level, I suppose, as you may know, I'm the son of immigrants. My parents came to the United States over 40 years ago from a small country, war-torn country in East Africa, came to the United States as refugees. And just one generation removed, because of their hard work, their sacrifices, and the freedoms and the opportunities that we have in this country that are sacrosanct, that don't exist in a lot of other countries in the world, they were able to make it, live the American dream, and to see their son become a member of the United States House of Representatives. And to me, that is a reflection, I think, of everything that makes our country wonderful and exceptional and great. I think we are at our best with respect to immigration when we are a beacon of hope and liberty to folks around the world, and it's important for our immigration policy, I think, to be consistent with our values as a country. Now, that being said, I think we also believe, I certainly believe, and I think most citizens in this congressional district, in this state, and in this country believe that it's important to have a secure border, a secure southern border and a secure northern border, for that matter. That border security is important, is in fact vital. And hearkening back to how my initial response to your question, what makes this issue as a public policy matter so confounding is I think the contours of the solutions are fairly straightforward. In 2006, Ted Kennedy, the late Ted Kennedy, and the late John McCain introduced a bill, a compromise measure, that essentially addressed the confluence of both a legal pathway to citizenship for those who have known no country but the United States as their home, and sufficient measures to secure our southern border. Our senior senator, 7 years later, made the same attempt in 2013. Senator Bennett, as part of the Gang of Eight, you may recall that particular debate. That was 11 years ago. The basic contours of comprehensive immigration reform, to me, are fairly straightforward, and they are widely supported by the American public. And if I went out and polled 10 of my neighbors in Lafayette, or Longmont, or in Boulder, or in Fort Collins, I suspect most would agree, which is precisely why we've been unable to get it done in Washington, D.C. Because there are political actors who would seek to leverage, I think, this issue and the debate around the issue for political gain. And that has kept our immigration laws from being reformed for the better part of 40 years, since the final years of the Reagan administration, which is the last time that our immigration laws were reformed in a fundamental way. Last thing I'll say on this, perhaps no craven display of this to me, or perhaps no more craven display of this to me, was the recent debate in the United States Senate, in which a Democratic senator, Senator Murphy, an independent senator, Senator Sinema, and a Republican senator, very conservative Republican senator, who I had the privilege of meeting during the impeachment trial 3 years ago when I was on the floor of the United States Senate, Senator Lankford of Oklahoma, very conservative Republican, came together and crafted a compromise measure that surely would not be something that every person would agree with, but ultimately made the effort. And that bill was rejected, unfortunately, by Senator Lankford's colleagues, and the Republican colleagues in his caucus. And I think, to me, that was again, a harbinger of perhaps the way in which this debate's going to continue to unfold, unfortunately. But we're going to have to keep trying, because the country, I think, faces dire straits with respect to resolving this fundamental question. Great question.
It's so good to have you as part of our Colorado community for so many years, going back to student body at CU, and to reflect further on what you share about the decay of our institutions. You've alluded to the need for bipartisan and for relationships. Are there other areas that have led to the decay of institutions, and that where you see hopeful signs or where we can be of support?
It's a great question, and thank you for your kind words. You've aged me significantly. Thank you for reminding me that I once was a young whippersnapper who came to Rotary, my first appearance to Boulder Rotary. I remember it well. I was student body president at the University of Colorado, and the Rotary met at the UMC at CU Boulder. This was 20 years ago, 21, 22 years ago. In any event, it has been certainly a journey for me, and I'm grateful to you and many others who have given me the opportunity to serve the public in this way. What I would say is there isn't one particular sort of silver bullet to addressing this decay that I described. There are certain drivers that have been more pernicious than others. Perhaps the one that everyone agrees on is social media and the development of social media. I think there's a risk at kind of laying blame on social media kind of in this myopic way. It is not the end-all be-all as to kind of causing all of these collateral consequences in terms of our public debates. But I do think it is a big driver. I think back to when, as I said, I've been fortunate to be in public life for some time now. I served on the Board of Regents from 2008 to 2014. And it feels as though that was ages ago, just in terms of how debate around complicated and nuanced public policy would unfold. And we didn't have Twitter back then, right? Facebook was in its infancy. The vast majority of the social media platforms that exist today did not exist back then. So the incentive structure, not just for our politicians and government representatives, but I think for citizens by and large, was very different. You now have a system, both because of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, cable television, of course, right, in which confirmation bias is the central currency, right? If I ask an average citizen, if they watch cable television, to the extent they do, they largely watch one channel, right? Or if they're on social media, who do you follow? You follow the individuals that you tend to agree with, right? Folks that perhaps share your worldview. And in that system, it's hard to find nuance. It's basically devoid of nuance. And so, yeah, I've done a great job of prescribing the problem and diagnosing it, not offering many solutions, I suppose. I think honestly, and I'm being facetious here, I think part of this is going to have to be from the bottom up. If we're counting on members of Congress to change the incentive system that they themselves have benefited from, right, in terms of becoming television and social media celebrities and personalities, and I'm not mentioning any names here, but you can take a few guesses. I think that's going to be awfully difficult. I think it's going to be incumbent on institutions like this one, like the Rotary. Your survival, very much, I don't mean your mortal survival individually, I care about that too, but the survival of the organization of Rotary in continuing to be robust and thriving is directly connected, in my view, to the health of our democracy and our public debate.
I'd like to ask a variation on the wonderful questions my fellow Rotarians have already asked. I'm almost 81. I spent 70-some of those years having complete faith in all American institutions, even though I might have disagreed with the Supreme Court decision. I have lost that faith. And so I really have lost that faith. I don't have the respect for courts and certain judges and what have you. And I never had that until sometime in my 70s. My question is this, Joe. Do you think in my lifetime I might have my faith restored?
What a great question. Well, first I'd say you look awfully good for 81. So I don't know whatever you're doing, I need to do. Whatever diet you're on. I certainly hope so. And I'm going to do everything in my power to restore your faith. And I think that is a core component of the work that I and my colleagues are charged to do. What I would say, I suppose, where's Judy? Judy Harriet's here. She's a wonderful friend of mine. As I reach into my coat, I said I was going to pull it. I don't know where I put it. She gave me a little pin. The pin says hope. Now, you can't see it from up here, but it's just, and she knows hope is it's a big driver of my life and the work that I do. There's a great quote. I'll tell a quick story and a direct answer to your question. In 2018, when I was running for Congress for the first time, in October of 2018, I went down to Children's Hospital in Aurora at Anschutz to do a tour. It's kind of learning more about our healthcare system. And during the tour, they took us to a particular wing of the hospital where there were children who are either terminally ill or have very significant illnesses who could still be able to participate in a classroom setting. They have teachers come in, and so there was a chalkboard and looked like any normal classroom would here in our community. And on one wall, there were all these quotes. And I asked the individual who's giving us the tour where those are from. He said, well, the students pick a quote that inspires them, and they put it up on the wall. And I saw one of these quotes that I had never heard before, which is that while fear is contagious, so is hope. And the quote had no author. And I thought a lot. This is about a week and a half before the election night. And I thought a lot about both that quote and also the child who I've never met who put that quote on the wall, and just how much fear that young child must have been experiencing in their own life, battling, God forbid, a serious or terminal illness, but clearly found a way to lean on hope. And by virtue of putting that on the wall, spreading hope. And I use that quote religiously now. And hence, Judy, I don't know if this is a sign that I'm using it too much maybe, but she giving me this, I think she gave it to me because it's meant to convey that I should continue to have hope about our collective future, and we all should have hope. Our country has been through very difficult times. I mean, I consider myself a student of history. You go back, we have faced test after test after test, we've always risen to the occasion. It may have taken us a bit longer than we would have liked on certain occasions, but in every instance, decency, humility, generosity, empathy, core American values ultimately have prevailed. And I have no doubt that that will be the case with respect to this current period of American history that we're on. I'll tell one final story in response to your question. Then I'm going to make these answers really short because I know there's many other questions. But there's a congressman who was elected in 1926 in Chicago, Illinois, named Oscar Stanton DePriest. This congressman was the first black congressman from the state of Illinois ever elected, but he also was the only black congressman at the time in the House, 435 members, the only one. Right? He, right before he's about to be sworn in, finds that some of the delegations, the way in which members of the House were sworn in back then in the House of Representatives, is you were sworn in by state. So the state of Alabama, the members would go down to the floor, you raise your right hand, you take the oath, you're a member of Congress, and then down the descending list of states. He learns, the Speaker of the House learns, that several of the state delegations are going to object to him being seated. So, the Speaker, the day that the House is set to be opened, he ascends, his name is Nicholas Longworth. There's a building named after him, Longworth Building in the Capitol, where my office was for 4 years. He ascends the dais of the Speaker's chair and says, "We've decided to do things differently. Rather than doing it by state, we are all going to take the oath together. All 435 of us, we're going to raise our right hand. You're a congressman." That system has not changed in 100 years. And when I was sworn in 2018, I remember leaning over to a buddy of mine who is no longer, he's the lieutenant governor of New York now. He left the Congress, and saying, "Why are they swearing us in this way? You know, it's kind of like a madhouse. All 435 of us raising our hands, noise, and why don't we do it like the Senate does, where it's very particular, one at a time?" And he didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer either. So I started researching it and found this story. Again, to me, it tells a broader story about the ability of people to overcome difficult circumstances at different points in our history. And I have no doubt, as I said, that we'll come through it again. And I believe it'll be in your lifetime.
I just wanted to let you know that we have about 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll keep my answer short. No more stories about obscure members of Congress that you haven't heard of.
Thank you, Congressman, for your talk. My name is Paul Riemann. I'm a visiting Rotarian from Wisconsin.
Oh, great.
Thank you. The climate crisis is here and real, and so would you please share your thoughts and hopes, and particularly to the extent that you have knowledge of carbon fee and dividend, and citizens' climate lobby and border adjustments? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly something I'm very passionate about. I'm a strong supporter of the particular bill that you referenced, that Citizens Climate Lobby has, of course, been advocating for. I have been largely agnostic, I would say, about the vehicle of achieving a carbon policy, and more sort of a proponent of trying to do whatever we can do. And so to the extent that that bill, obviously there's other versions of cap and trade and different models that have been proposed in the Congress, and I'm sort of all of the above with respect to those bills. I would just say more broadly, we've made great progress in the last year and a half, and yet we know that it's not nearly enough, that it was merely a down payment in terms of the work that needs to be done to address what is the existential threat facing our country, facing my children and your children and children's children. The Inflation Reduction Act, which I know you're very familiar with, but I don't think it can be overstated, the impact that bill, that law, is having already and will continue to have generationally in terms of investing in renewables, in terms of the R&D investments that were included in that bill. It is, in terms of scope, the most significant action taken in the fight against climate change in the history of the federal government. And so I'm very proud of that work. I'm proud that we were able to get that across the finish line. A lot of the work now, I think, is happening at the subnational level. And of course, we see that here in Colorado. I suspect that's the case in Wisconsin, different political obstacles perhaps that they are having to overcome in that particular state. But here in Colorado and in the municipalities, the county level, a lot of activity happening, leveraging the tax credits and the significant funding that was allocated within the Inflation Reduction Act. One thing we are working through now is thinking about what's next. Right? We did a lot in the last few years. How do you kind of build on what we've done going into the next Congress? And that's a matter of open discussion and debate right now.
I think we have time for one more question.
Unfortunately, it's a big question too, Joe, but this is as much for the club's benefit as anything else, that in 3 weeks' time, we're going to do a program on the crisis on the Colorado River.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it is a Rotary-produced program with a video, and we're going to have a conversation afterward about how Rotary and the 7 Colorado Basin states might contribute to solution to this problem. And so could you just say a couple of words about resources you have or advice you might have about how we proceed?
Sure. Well, I would say that it is a incredibly complicated, complex topic that is certainly relevant, from a timing perspective for you all to be engaged in. And there are a plethora of resources that I would encourage you to survey, perhaps starting with the late David Getchus. I don't know if some of you are familiar with Mr. Getchus, who was the former dean of the law school. One of the reasons I went to CU Law School, he convinced me to go. His treatise on water law. Of course, Professor Wilkinson as well, late Professor Wilkinson at CU Law, is another individual who's done quite a bit in this sphere. I would just tell you, in terms of what's happening in Congress, this is a matter of robust debate. We have taken a page. I don't like to say that we copy the Senate too often, but in this case, I will give Senator Hickenlooper full credit. He created this Colorado River Caucus in the United States Senate. Again, the idea being that it is in our interest to create a forum by which the upper basin and the lower basin states and representatives thereof can have conversations. At the end of the day, much of this will end in litigation, I suspect, and that's already, as you know, kind of on the horizon. But having members of Congress and representatives of the House, and then of course senators in the Senate, who are willing to have conversations across the table and with the Bureau of Reclamation, I think is important, and perhaps conducive to at least allocating more resources broadly for watershed protection projects, for investments that support the decisions that are being made in those respective states. So we created this Colorado River Caucus in the House, again, emulating it off of what our partners in the Senate had done. It has been productive thus far. The Bureau of Reclamation is, of course, watching this very, very closely. At the end of the day, of course, my advocacy begins and ends with advocating for the state of Colorado and for the 2nd Congressional District, which includes a number of communities that have faced innumerable challenges on the western slope because of the water diversions over the course of the last half century. Places like Grand Lake, Granby, Fraser, a variety of communities in Eagle and Summit, and then of course stretching further west outside of my district to the Utah border. And so I think we're going to have to do everything we can to support Governor Polis, to support the Colorado Water Resource Board and their efforts. They have laid out, I think, a very reasonable path. We're supportive of it. I say we, meaning my office. I suspect the majority of our delegation is. Certainly our senators are, and we work closely with them, and we'll continue to do so. But I think it's a great topic for the Rotary to get involved in, and if anybody can solve a century-old battle over a river that provides for 50 million people, it's the Rotary. So I bid you farewell, and I thank you for your good wishes. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to represent this incredible, eclectic, wonderful community. I'm very grateful. So, thank you. One more question. Yes, sir. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Neguse, we've known each other for a long time, and you know from your previous trips to visit us at Rotary that we reserve the right to have the last word, yes, even with a suitably humble member of Congress. Please accept our thanks for an excellent, articulate, and thoughtful presentation, one that stayed away from the shoals of bias and partisanship. We also appreciate your dedication and effective work representing the Colorado 2nd. We honor your willingness to build coalitions and work across the aisle. I can vouch that you walk the talk, and it's a high priority with us at Rotary. So thank you for modeling that important vision. And also I want to get a quick shout out to Max Coker, who's a Boulder Rotarian and on your team. We're proud to have Max in our club. And I just want to say that you're very effective on a national basis, but people don't often realize how effective you are in the 2nd itself, and how you go to endless extent to visit with people, to meet with large groups and small, 4 or 500, it doesn't matter, you're there. And one example we just encountered was the Assembly of the Democratic Party. And I know from watching the news that you had been in Congress late on a Friday. You took a plane and somehow made it back to Boulder and gave a rousing speech to the Assembly there. You had them on their feet. So thank you so much for your dedication to our 2nd Congressional District. And I want to turn to the Boulder Rotarians that are here. And please take a moment to think about your family of origin and their story as they made the difficult and often perilous journey to this country. They made a life here and made it possible for each of us to have a life, a family, and to be members of the Boulder Rotary Club. Representative Neguse, in listening to your experiences, hopes, and dreams for Congress, for our community, for our state, for our country, we should take heart that it's immigrants like your family and our families who have made America strong, principled, and a beacon to the world. So thank you, and in your honor, we're donating 100 doses to our long-standing drive to
Food brings people together, nourishing body and soul. And this week, Boulder Rotary is proud to welcome our new partner, Community Table Kitchen, catering our lunches and partnering with us in service above self. Bridge House empowers people who are experiencing homelessness. They connect their clients to housing and employment opportunities so they can realize and embrace their future. Community Table Kitchen is one program that trains those experiencing homelessness to work in the catering industry. Let's all take a moment to welcome Community Table Kitchen and welcome Chef John and all the staff here at Community Table Kitchen, helping Boulder Rotary have a great lunch.
At Suding's Place, book lovers convene to discuss together a theme not so lean. Loneliness to connection they'll explore from 5 until 7, maybe more, a lively debate in a world unseen. On a Monday, the 8th, they will meet from 5 until 7 to discuss a feat. Human connection, the power so grand, in a world where together we stand, at Sue's where both heart and mind greet. Please join us for the Red Badge Committee's upcoming Red Badge Breakfast at 7:15 a.m. on Thursday, April 11th at the Buff, 2600 Canyon Boulevard. The discussion will be about the club's international service programs. Be there or be square. Boulder Rotary's 3rd annual Service Above Self dinner will be here before you know it. Saturday, April 27th, 5:30 p.m. at the Boulder Country Club. We will honor 4 outstanding members of our community and the winners of our Service Above Self Award. Gary Abusi, Sandra Weeks, Sarah Mishak, and Rich Wildow. Each will have $1,000 donated in their name to their preferred charity. To find out more about these outstanding individuals, meet them in person, to make a difference yourself, please purchase your $150 per person tickets now by seeing Leslie Hertz.
Every year, Boulder Rotary sends students to RILA, the Rotary Youth Leadership Award Camp held at YMCA of the Rockies in Estes Park. Students learn about their own ability to lead, community building skills, and they have fun. Students who are currently a high school sophomore, junior, or senior may apply to attend RILA, and 7th graders may apply to attend Young RILA. RILA will be held at the YMCA of the Rockies in Estes Park from July 28th to August 2nd, 2024, and Young RILA conferences are held June 23rd to the 28th or July 7th to 12th. We need your help to find great students to apply for these scholarships. We have until April 30th. The RIB, our newsletter, has a link to the RILA applications. Don't miss the chance to give the gift of confidence and leadership to a young person. Next week, step aboard the RTD journey, where progress and innovation meet at every station. Under the leadership of Lynn Gussinger, RTD Board Chair, RTD has been working to imagine a world where travel doesn't break the bank and have lowered its fares, making mobility more accessible for everyone. Now they're working on a program called Zero Fares for Youth to break barriers to movement and education opportunities for young people. Despite the challenges like the intricate dance with Tabor's exemption and the complex geography of the Northwest Rail Study, RTD is still on the road forward with initiatives like its partnership with Front Range Passenger Rail. The road ahead may have its bumps, like workforce hurdles and sharp turns in the legislative landscape to navigate, but RTD is steering through the twists and turns ahead. So hop on next week and find out about RTD's journey to a more connected Colorado.
This is Kitty DeKeeper, and I want you to have a great weekend.